The 2026 Ghost in the Machine and the Death of the Dollar. It is February 17th, 2026, and Manhattan wakes up like nothing happened. The coffee carts hiss. The screens glow green. We think money dies with a war, or a president, or a panic. But currencies don't die from headlines. They die from a ledger that stops agreeing with itself. Most people believe the dollar is a flag in your wallet, a hard symbol, a promise backed by power. That belief is the costume. The truth is uglier and colder. The dollar is a balance sheet, and balance sheets can bleed. In the basement of a midtown bank, a rack of servers exhales warm air into a locked room. There is no gold down there, no stacks of cash, only synchronized clocks and old code. The screens upstairs don't show value, they show consent. At 9:30 a.m., the opening bell rings across New York. Traders smile, stretch, and hunt for fractions. London is already deep into its morning. Tokyo is closing its day. The planet is stitched together by settlement times. Then a number flickers, not a price, a position, a record of ownership. It blinks once like a tired eye. The trade still prints, but the confirmation doesn't arrive. Somewhere a ledger line goes missing. Bang. Listen. We tell ourselves markets crash when investors get scared. That is the bedtime story. This morning isn't fear. It is insolvency by subtraction. It is bankruptcy without a court. The first warning is almost invisible. A brief delay in the plumbing. A payment that sits in limbo for 7 extra seconds. 7 seconds is an eternity in high-frequency trading. The machines interpret it as a wound. The algos begin to hedge. They dump risk. They buy safety. Treasuries surge like people grabbing oxygen. But oxygen only matters if your lungs still work. And in 2026, the lungs are digital. On another floor, a compliance officer refreshes a dashboard and sees a phrase she has never seen before. Ledger mismatch. Two systems disagree about the same dollar. Both claim it. Neither can prove it. That is the start of the ghost. At 9:31 a.m., a cluster in New Jersey throws a silent error. At 9:31 and 14 seconds, a mirrored backup repeats it. At 9:31 and 29 seconds, a third system corrects the mismatch by deleting the oldest record. It thinks it is cleaning. It is amputating. In a trading room in Canary Wharf, a risk manager watches a heat map go from yellow to red. The models aren't panicking. They are failing. The math can't reconcile ownership fast enough. The balance sheet is choking. Within 1 minute, $120 billion in market value evaporates. Not stolen. Not transferred. Just unaccounted for. Think about the scale of that. It's like an entire city's labor disappearing into fog. The news anchors reach for language they understand. Glitch, volatility, flash crash. But this is not a dip in price. This is a break in proof. If the system can't prove who owns what, it can't price anything. The ghost doesn't smash windows. It rewrites receipts. It touches the most sacred thing in finance. The record, the ledger line that says you exist. You've been told your deposits are safe, insured, protected. But insurance is a promise written on paper. In 2026, paper is just nostalgia. The real money is a database entry. And that database entry is now unstable. Like a heartbeat that skips every third beat. Like a drunk accountant erasing decimals with a shaking hand. The dollar doesn't collapse with a bang. It collapses with bad bookkeeping. Now, let's rewind, because every thriller begins long before the gunshot. This story begins with majesty, with confidence, with parades made of numbers. In 2025, America looks invincible on the surface. Stadiums packed. Tech stocks roaring. The consumer still buying on credit. The port still moving containers like blood through arteries. The dollar is the world's language. It prices oil. It settles trade. It sits inside every foreign reserve vault like a crown jewel. When America speaks, the markets listen. The Federal Reserve is treated like a priesthood, a quiet group of people who can change reality with a sentence. They raise a rate. They cut a rate. They soothe the crowd. Wall Street is a city of polished marble and fast suits. The screens are a constant sunrise. Even the failures look elegant because they are framed as cycles. The illusion is complete. But beneath the surface, the foundation is rotting. Not with corruption in a movie sense, with something more boring and lethal, with debt stacked on debt like wet cardboard. The nation's balance sheet has been running hot for years. The deficits are not numbers anymore. They are habits. Each year, the Treasury sells more paper, and the world buys it because it has to. Foreign central banks hold dollars, not because they love them. They hold them because trade is wired to them. It is like living in a city where every door uses the same key. You can hate the key, but you still need it. Meanwhile, the private system gorges on leverage. Corporations borrow cheap. Households roll debt forward. Governments issue bonds like breath. The machine runs on refinancing, not repayment. In that world, money isn't a thing. It is a permission slip to borrow again. The economy is an addict, and the drug is liquidity. The moment the supply chain of cash stutters, the addict shakes. The monster in this story is not a hacker with a hoodie. It is the system's dependence on continuity, on settlement, on the assumption that tomorrow's ledger will match today's. That assumption is the true collateral, not gold, not armies. Agreement, a shared belief that the entries are real. The ghost attack targets that belief like a knife under the ribs. By late 2025, the warning signs are already there, not in headlines, in footnotes. Banks still run core systems that were stitched together decades ago. Legacy code wrapped in newer code, like duct tape on a cracked pipe. Every patch adds speed, but also adds fragility. Every optimization becomes a new place to hide. Every outsourced module becomes another black box no one truly understands. Then comes the trap, the addiction, the fatal flaw. In 2026, the world has built a trillion-dollar civilization on milliseconds. It doesn't stockpile, it doesn't pause, it clears. The antagonists are not generals. They are creditors and network effects, swift messages, clearinghouses, settlement rails, treasury auctions, bondholders who can refuse to roll the debt, and hovering above them all is one force, confidence, the market's willingness to believe the ledger. Once that breaks, everything else is theater. On February 17, 2026, the descent begins in earnest. At 9:33 a.m., the interbank market spreads widen. A basic overnight loan that cost 4.6% last week suddenly prints at 9.8%. Lenders are not charging for time. They are charging for trust. At 9:36 a.m., a European bank halts dollar wires. Not because it is out of dollars. because it can't verify where the dollars came from. That single hesitation is like a dam cracking. At 9:40 a.m., the first major exchange announces temporary technical issues. That phrase is corporate perfume. It smells nice, but it covers decay. The bids thin out. The ask spreads widen. By 10:05 a.m., the foreign exchange market turns feral. The dollar drops 7% against a basket of currencies in 1 hour. Traders don't know what the dollar is worth if the ledger is corrupted. They sell the symbol to escape the uncertainty. The Federal Reserve's emergency desk opens a channel to the biggest banks. They offer liquidity, trillions if needed. But liquidity only matters if the pipes work. You can't pump water into a collapsed tunnel. At 10:22 a.m., the ghost shows its signature. Small transactions clear. Large ones fail. It is selective. It is surgical. It is like a disease that attacks organs, not skin. By 10:45 a.m., corporate payroll processors report anomalies. Some employees are paid twice. Some are paid nothing. Some are told they owe their employer $12,400. The decimals have become weapons. Let that number sink in. A paycheck becomes a debt notice. A savings account becomes a liability. The balance sheet flips like a mirror in a funhouse. At 11:10 a.m., the first supermarket chain in New Jersey switches to cash only. But cash is scarce because people stopped using it years ago. The system trained them to trust the tap and go. Now the tap and go is dead. People rush to ATMs and the screens are blank. Not because the bank is empty, because the bank can't reconcile. It doesn't know which dollars are real. The rule of 3 hits like a drumbeat. The gold was gone. The credit was frozen. The allies had turned away. In 2026, allies means counterparties, and counterparties are backing off. In Washington, the Treasury Secretary is handed a printout. It looks like a spreadsheet, but it reads like a death certificate. Settlement backlog, $3.2 trillion. That is not a delay. That is a paralysis. The government tries to project calm. Statements are drafted. Words like resilience and stability are used like sandbags. But the market doesn't trade on speeches. It trades on clearance. By noon, the United States is running out of something it never thought it could lose: payment certainty. And payment certainty is the spine of sovereignty. Now comes the smoking gun. Every collapse has a document, a meeting, a piece of paper that seals fate like a foreclosure notice. On the afternoon of February 17, 2026, a closed-door session convenes between the Fed, the Treasury, the biggest banks, and the heads of the clearinghouses. No cameras, no transcripts, just sweat and coffee. A binder is placed on the table. It is labeled Protocol Sable 7. Inside is a contingency plan written years earlier for a different nightmare. It outlines the power to pause settlements, freeze certain accounts, and reroute national payments through an emergency ledger. One official says in plain, brutal language that the nation has 2 choices: admit the ledger is compromised, or pretend it isn't and watch everything burn. Another says the quiet part louder: if we stop the system, we confirm the ghost. A banker replies with the cold logic of a creditor: if we keep it open, we liquidate ourselves. That is the foreclosure moment. The state is negotiating with its own plumbing. They debate for 47 minutes. The numbers keep changing as they argue. That is the horror. A meeting about reality while reality keeps melting. At 2:03 p.m., the decision is made. The emergency ledger will go live. Selected payments will be prioritized. Food, fuel, military, utilities. Everything else goes to the back of the line. This is a liquidation sale, not of assets but of rights. The government is choosing which dollars matter. That means the old dollar is already dead. It just hasn't been buried. As soon as the emergency ledger activates, markets interpret it as a default on normalcy. The dollar falls another 12%. By 3 p.m., imports spike in price like a fever. Gas futures go vertical. In Los Angeles, a port operator receives a message. Payment verification pending. Containers sit idle. Drivers wait. A single stalled settlement becomes a stalled supply chain. Then a stalled city. In Texas, a power company begins rationing because fuel contracts can't clear. In Chicago, pharmacies can't restock because wholesalers demand verified settlement. In Miami, a hospital's procurement system flags unreconciled vendor accounts. This is the climax building, not in drama, in shortages. A nation discovers that modern life is a subscription to functioning ledgers. By evening, the social consequences hit. People are not rioting yet, they are confused. Confusion is the first stage of panic. The line at a grocery store becomes a silent courtroom. A cashier tells a mother her card declined. The mother insists there is money. The cashier shrugs, helpless. The ledger doesn't care about your insistence. The ledger only cares about matching entries. Across the country, small businesses stop accepting digital payments. They don't do it to be rebellious. They do it to survive. A restaurant can't pay its suppliers with a maybe. This is where sovereignty as solvency becomes real, not as a slogan, as a law. A nation that cannot settle is a nation that cannot command. On February 18, 2026, the default becomes official and everything but name. Overnight rates spike again. A key repo auction fails to fill. The Treasury tries to sell $68 billion in notes and gets bids for only $41 billion. The world is no longer lending on faith. At 8:12 a.m., the government announces temporary capital controls for stability. That is how you say we are insolvent without saying it. People hear the announcement and translate it instantly. Run. But where do you run when the doors are digital? You can't withdraw what the bank can't verify. You can't move what the network won't clear. You are trapped inside a number. By midday, the phrase "ghost in the machine" spreads online, not as poetry. As diagnosis, people swap screenshots of negative balances. They share videos of dead ATMs. They record the sound of panic. And then the new entity arrives, dressed as a rescue. The Emergency Financial Council, a committee with a clean logo and a calm voice. They appear on every working channel. They say the old dollar ledger is corrupted beyond repair. They say a patch would be irresponsible. They say civilization requires a reboot. They announce a new currency framework. They call it the Unity Token, a central bank digital currency issued instantly, distributed to every citizen, and used for every transaction. It is sold as a lifeboat, but lifeboats can be cages. To receive Unity, you must complete identity binding, face scan, fingerprint, voice print, a biometric handshake with the state. They claim it prevents fraud. It also prevents escape. The first credits appear in wallets by February 19, 2026. People cheer because they can buy bread again. But the bread comes with a receipt that never burns. Every purchase is recorded. Every trade is traced. And there is another catch. The credits expire. Spend within 72 hours, or they vanish. Programmable money, not a store of value, but a leash of behavior. The economy resumes moving, but it moves under supervision. The ghost attack becomes the excuse for permanent oversight. The government frames it as protection. Markets call it a regime change. Some citizens accept it because hunger is persuasive. Others resist quietly because dignity is stubborn. The resistance doesn't start with guns. It starts with offline value. Cigarettes become currency. Gas canisters become gold. Antibiotics become treasure. Seeds become futures contracts. In alleys and garages, barter returns like an old ghost with rough hands. Small towns create paper tokens signed by local councils. Not legal tender, just trust. A mechanic fixes a car for a bag of rice. A teacher tutors in exchange for propane. The state notices quickly. A parallel ledger is a threat. If people can live outside unity, unity loses power. The system needs captivity to function. So the financial integrity patrols begin. Units with vans and scanners. They hunt unauthorized exchange. They treat barter like counterfeiting. They treat privacy like terrorism. Meanwhile, rogue engineers build black boxes. Cheap devices assembled from scrap chips and old consoles. They create mesh networks that dodge centralized internet. Messages hop from home to home like whispers in the dark. A shadow economy organizes itself. Prices emerge. Real prices based on scarcity, not on official dashboards. The unity token world becomes sterile and bright. The ghost market becomes cold and alive. And then the second smoking gun drops like a folder sliding across a table. On March 3, 2026, a leak hits the remaining independent servers. It contains internal memos, routing logs, and a signature buried in code. The ghost attack wasn't foreign. It wasn't a rival state. It wasn't a basement hacker cult. The fingerprints point inward toward a covert division tied to global central banks. An inside job. A controlled demolition. The collapse becomes a debt jubilee disguised as an emergency. Trillions in bad liabilities wiped out by ledger corruption. A bankruptcy performed on the whole public. The memos use cold phrases. Sovereign insolvency mitigation. Legacy debt excision. Behavioral stabilization via programmable distribution. Translation. We broke the old money to replace it with control. The public reaction is fury, then silence. Because fury can't buy food. People realize rebellion has a price tag. And the price tag is access. The unity system punishes dissent without sirens. If a district protests, credits in that district expire early. If a neighborhood organizes, transport access is throttled. If a person posts too much, their spending limits tighten. The leash is invisible, but it bites. This is the new feudalism, not castles and swords, servers and permissions. In late 2026, the dollar still exists in name, but it is a relic, a historical term. A ghost currency used for museum charts. The unity token becomes the unit of survival. And that is the true death of the dollar. Not because it lost a war, because it lost its ledger. The balance sheet was liquidated. The nation was foreclosed. People used to say sovereignty came from borders and armies. The new era teaches a harsher line. Sovereignty is solvency. If you can't settle, you can't rule. Now comes the generational aftermath, because debt never disappears. It changes owners. The old treasury bonds don't vanish. They are converted, haircut, and reissued in unity terms. A restructuring agreement is signed in December 2027, and it reads like a bankruptcy court ruling.